Hello, everyone. How is your SharePoint conference going so far? Yes, woohoo! Awesome. You still have energy late in the afternoon. I appreciate that so much. I know that these conferences can be taxing to the feet, to the mind. Hopefully you're getting some coffee and getting what you need here. So my name is Karuana Gatimu.
My name's Adam Harmetz.
And we're going to talk with you today about, give you an overview of what is Microsoft Teams. So can you give me a little bit of a show of hands? How many of you are already using Microsoft Teams out there? Okay, quite a lot of you. That's fantastic. How many of you are using the Microsoft Teams mobile application? Excellent. We love that. The mobile application is a fantastic experience. So Adam and I have I'm always happy to be on stage with Adam because when I was coming up in the SharePoint community, he was one of the luminaries of SharePoint that I used to get to see give these presentations, and I thought, someday maybe I'll get to do that. And here we are together. And there's a reason that we're together. It's because we really do have a fantastic story between these two products. You'll see if you follow either one of us that we do #BetterTogether. And that's how I want you to think of Microsoft Teams, right? As the hub for teamwork in Microsoft, it's bringing together those of us inside the company and all of you into that experience for your collaboration, communication, and meetings. So it's fantastic to be on the stage with Adam today. So what I'd like to do also is tell you a little bit about this. For any of you who followed me before or seen any of my other presentations, you know I always start out with this slide because it's very important that we realize that we're not actually here for the technology. We're actually here to help you empower your organizations to achieve more. And that's not just slideware from Microsoft. This is what folks like myself and Adam and many other people dedicate their lives to. We really want this technology to empower what you're doing. It's also very important to remember that when you're driving adoption of any technology really, but especially Microsoft Teams, the business scenarios that you associate it to are very important. That's what people actually care about. They want to know, how are they going to get more done? How does it matter in their day-to-day lives? We may be really excited about a new feature that we've launched, but oftentimes people are really focused on what their outcomes are. So I always ask everyone to focus on the fact that this change is really about people. We know that we have, and you heard this in the keynote this morning also, we know that we have diverse employees. There's 5 generations in the workplace together. Team-based collaboration has taken off and is really the way that we get work done today, both in our offices and on our mobile devices. And we work in many global organizations. 72% of workers are going to be working remotely by 2020. And so creating that culture of collaboration, of really building teamwork when all of you may not be in the same office can be very challenging. And we think our product really hits those areas well. You hear us talk about it. Again, Microsoft Teams is the hub for teamwork. There'll be a test at the end, just making sure everybody's got that phrase down. And Microsoft Teams really does help you communicate differently, right? Through chat and meetings and calls, it's bringing together those capabilities for real-time communication. Of course, there's the deep collaboration features as well. It's deeply integrated with Office 365 and all those capabilities that we saw both this morning and we're going to show you today. That integration with SharePoint and Forms and many of the other tools inside of Microsoft 365. What some of you may not know, though, is that Microsoft Teams is also a platform. You can develop on top of Microsoft Teams and create integrations to your existing line of business applications and really pull together a customized experience. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And of course, we have a thriving partner community. These are people who have already created applications that can be integrated into Microsoft Teams, common ones like you may be using today. And as always, you can work with confidence. Teams being a part of the Microsoft 365 family, it's built on top of all the security and compliance features that you've become accustomed to in Office 365. So let's hop over now and actually take a look at the product itself. Now, I happen to be in the web application right now. As I'm sure many of you know, but some of you may not, we have a desktop application, a web application, and a mobile application. And that desktop application also works for your Mac devices in your organization. One of the big steps forward that we've certainly taken is in really developing those Mac experiences with parity to the PC experiences, and that's something we're pretty proud of, including our mobile device. Over here we have what we call this left rail, and this gives you the core applications that are available and these workloads that are available to the users. Now, one of the things that we just announced recently is the IT admin capability to manage what icons and workloads appear for users in your organization. So think about if you have first-line workers, for instance, retail store employees, or frontline workers who are working down on the manufacturing floor, you may not want them to be able to schedule meetings or maybe make personal phone calls, things of that nature. So you're in charge of what those icons, how they appear. The activity feed is where I go first thing every morning. Now, I used to go to Outlook first thing, I still do, but now I look at them both together, right? So I want to see what's happened overnight. I look at my calendar, I look at my email, and I come and look at my activity feed. And I love this activity feed because I can filter it depending upon the different sorts of activity I'm interested in. I can also click over here, and this is something, if you want to be a power user of Teams, make sure that you are teaching your people in your organization to @mention. Because this shows me where people have specifically called me out in a chat or a channel conversation. And so I'm able to look at those items first and filter out some of the additional conversations that are happening around the teams. I have one-on-one or one-to-many chat that's available. And here Rima is saying something really nice to me, which I really appreciate, so I'm going to respond to that. And a couple things here. I can mark this as unread. And that's something I do frequently to be able to remind myself of items. Maybe I'm on the go, but I'm just going to go ahead and give that a quick like. And I can also respond. You are here. Now, of course, in our chat, this is persistent chat. And so what that means is that I can see the totality of my conversations with Rima over time. That's a little bit different from how chat in, for instance, Skype for Business worked, where you would have individual conversations, they'd be stored in an Outlook folder. But now I can see the history that I have with this particular person or group of people. Now, over here in Teams, this is the heart and soul of the product here. Teams are groups of people who come together to deliver a common goal. And people ask us all the time, how should I, structure my teams? Bigger is better in most organizations, right? You want to minimize the number of teams that you have so that they're really valuable to people, and think about the types of shared outcomes that they may have in your organization. You can see I have here that's this is a DTX hub. That's the name of this company. It's kind of an overall org-wide team. But I'm going to scroll down here and take a look at our team for Teamwork Champions. We recommend that every organization have a champions program that allows people to learn how to use the product. It's so much easier if I ask Adam a question about how to learn something than if I ask, the random help desk. Help desk is great. It's a very helpful tool, but I'm always going to trust my peer, a person that I work with, a bit easier than I may trust someone else, especially if I feel like my question I should maybe know the answer to. So in the Teamworks Champions team, we're really able to have conversations amongst us, and we're also able to integrate other components of Office 365. Now, the meeting experience is what we really think is spectacular. I actually had the opportunity the other day. I was flying somewhere, I think to Washington, D.C., but I had to give a presentation at the same time. I was in SeaTac Airport on my mobile device giving a presentation while I was waiting for my plane. And this is the kind of quality that we're really delivering with the re-engineering that we've delivered in Teams, built on Azure and for the cloud first. This is integrated with my Outlook calendar. So Teams meetings that you create here inside the product are going to show up on the calendar that you have, likely on your mobile device via Outlook. But I can do more than that. I'm going to go in here and schedule a meeting. And I'm going to drop down this list right here. I'm actually going to create a live event. Have any of you used live events yet to do trainings? Couple of people, maybe? All right, so live events is really the ability that you have to essentially webcast for the enterprise, Right, so what you can do with live events is you can set it up to allow people within your organization, in a specific group, or even from the public to come and attend an event that you are giving virtually. We use this all the time, right? Don't you use it in your organization, live events?
Yeah, we do various all hands, demos of new products, that type of thing.
Right. So the ability to not only just have these large-scale executive meetings, but also to do something like, I'm going to put this in quarterly planning. Okay. Now, of course, it's integrated with AAD, so if I had a meeting room here, I could insert a meeting room, and I can invite certain people who are going to be presenters. I'm going to invite Rima, because she's going to help me present. It's going to be today between 3:30 and 4, and I can put in information about this. I can also control what kind of experience Rima has. Is she a producer who's helping me run this event, or is she simply presenting content? I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and now I can see here that I have some choices. Am I going to limit this event to key people and groups in my organization, or am I going to have this be org-wide? There's an additional configuration option that would also allow me to make this public. And you don't have to have a lot of fancy equipment for this, right? I do recommend you have a good microphone, right? It's never best to do these meetings kind of yelling at your device. I see people do it. It doesn't really sound very good. But what you can do is you can go ahead and schedule this, and it's going to use the power of Azure and Stream behind the scenes. It's automatically going to record your meeting, and it's going to provide that recording to you after the meeting so that you can then post it on a channel and use it as a training asset. It also does great things like give you moderated Q&A. You can integrate this in with Yammer or with Teams or directly in SharePoint, so there's a variety of experiences that you can deliver. But it's a very simple thing to do, and we think it's a powerful part of the new and improved meeting experience.
Yeah, over the years, I've definitely tried to use just regular meetings for this, but the way it moderates sort of these large-scale formats is incredibly useful, right? It sort of helps the meeting run on time, keeps it focused. You can, have a more professional live stream.
Exactly, and I love the fact that it is a little bit time delayed. So if there's any sort of an issue or what have you, you do have a few seconds before anything that you're saying is given out to the people who are participating in the event. And here's an example of a stream channel integrated directly into Teams. So you can have this stream channel right here inside of the team and share that education material directly. And think of how this could really transform your training initiatives, new employee onboarding, training for specific tools and processes, things of that nature. So we really think that this is pretty fantastic. Of course, files are a big part of this, and I can obviously see the files that are in my OneDrive or in the various teams that I'm in. The last thing that I wanted to show you briefly is our store. You heard me mention that Teams is a platform. And I clicked here on the store icon, and I can now see the various categories of applications. Now again, I want to reassure you, there are IT Pro controls for this. I have a tenant that happens to be set up so that I can see all these applications, but application by application, you can view and control what apps are available in your area. And we just at Build announce that we're going to be doing an app certification process. It's a self-certification that happens by each of the app publishers. But that way you can have more confidence in the way that your data is being managed in the product. I love these top picks, things like MindMeister and Write. These are very popular apps that are used around the world because we know that it's not just a Microsoft world, but if we're really trying to build a hub for teamwork, we need to bring all these experiences together within the context of those channels that we saw a little bit earlier. So let's go back. I'm going to do one other thing, because I always love to show the SharePoint experience inside of Teams, right? Some people are like, well, how should I think about these things? People who are comfortable going directly to SharePoint can continue to go directly to SharePoint. But if you want to make sure that, for instance, new employees understand that that SharePoint home site or that hub site is available to them, you can pin it directly inside of the team. And it is just beautiful with the new communications site. So I'm excited about all that good stuff.
Do you want me to,
Yeah.
should we go back to the slide deck real
Yes,
quick?
I will.
And
Let me do that for you.
take it forward. So, hopefully this was a good, quick tour of Microsoft Teams, persistent chat, team-based collaborative work, and meetings. So that was the core modules within Microsoft Teams. I'm going to talk for a little more detail, being a little more of the, we're both sort of the SharePoint people, but I guess I've been sticking with SharePoint as you've moved on to Microsoft Teams as center of gravity. So how we think about fitting SharePoint into Microsoft Teams, why that's important, and how it goes to the larger extensibility model of Microsoft Teams. In essence, how Microsoft Teams being a hub for teamwork is really more than just a buzzword. You'll have to watch me on time, because I could probably spend the rest of the hour talking about high strategy. But I did want to start, before I just demo all the SharePoint integration in more detail. My mic's cutting a little in and out, but hopefully you can hear me well. How to think about, frankly, the larger Microsoft 365 vision. So this is a slide that Jeff Teeper's boss, Rajesh Jha, used at Build. And he also actually presented it and used it to frame to some of us, the partners within his product organization, broadly speaking, Office and Windows, just last week. I thought it was a good frame to really understand why we created a new endpoint and a new hub for teamwork. And it really starts with, you notice in the center of this chart is the Microsoft Graph. So that is a technology we've been working on for, frankly, a decade or more. Thousands of engineers that are really breaking down apart the app silos and taking a very people-centric approach to collaboration. So if you're familiar with the Microsoft Graph, it's a nodes of people and groups and the activity that's going on within them. And that is an incredibly serious investment for us. And if you think about our large, can people hear me okay, or is this cutting in and out? Okay, all right. And if you think about why we did that, our mission as a company is to help people and organizations achieve more. And frankly, when we were growing up in the 90s, some of our app silos between Word and SharePoint and Office and Windows institutionalized some barriers we really wanted to break down as time went on. And so we've made a decade-long investment in building the Graph, which really gives you insights about people and a very people-centric approach. And Microsoft Teams really is a fresh information architecture that does put that person front and center. It's your dashboard for communicating with your groups of teams and individuals. And we're really excited about both leveraging, I talked to a lot of customers. A lot of customers are familiar with the IA of Office. Office includes SharePoint, obviously. SharePoint is Office server. The notion of a site, the notion of an inbox, the notion of devices like Windows. And they are comfortable with that, and that's great. And as Karuana was saying, you can access the full richness of Microsoft 365 through those. But there are also those that are really leaning into this people-centric way of working. And Microsoft Teams, frankly, without the baggage of 20 years of history, is being able to take a fresh approach to how to compose together for teamwork, taking a very real-time chat-based approach, but also a very people-centric approach. However, of course, as Microsoft, we don't want you to have to make these terrible trade-offs. If I really want to work with files, though, I can't do it in this people-centric way within Microsoft Teams. I have to go to Office or something like that. And so this is why you can see there's these connections between all these different endpoints in Teams and Microsoft Office. And so we are on a multi-year mission to make everything you can do in SharePoint be able to work within Microsoft Teams. We're pretty far along in that journey. We're not completely done. I'll give a product tour that shows you where we are, gives you a framing for that, and basically talks about what I think you should lean into right now and what you might wait for as time goes by as we consider how to compose all the elements of SharePoint in Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to switch over to this demo laptop. And if you really want to break down SharePoint into its component parts, it is files, lists, and pages. Those compose together into sites, but those are the three fundamental concepts of SharePoint. You could also include apps if you'd want to in there, or web parts, which we'll talk about in a little second. And so I'll just do a quick demo and show you those three major components of SharePoint composing within tabs or chats within Teams. And so the first is files. As was demoed in the keynote, and I think maybe you briefly showed, here I am in a sales channel, and if I click on files, what you can see here is the files for this channel in the Microsoft Teams UX. This is actually a mini copy of the SharePoint front end running in Microsoft Teams. As we add new features to our document library UX, they appear in our web experiences as well as the Microsoft Teams experience at the same time. It's literally the same code running over and over again. And this is why we love the demo. They're very colorful, required formatting, conditional formatting, required info, various metadata columns, pinning, a sync button, et cetera, et cetera. And so you really don't have to make this compromise. If you just love conditional formatting of document libraries, but wanted to use that within Teams, you can do that right here. And so this is starting to roll out. We hope to have it broadly rolled out within the next month or so. And I think over the long term, you'll see a durability. This is probably where we're farthest along in having a shared code, shared experiences, and as we plan forward in features, we want to roll a feature out. We think about how it composes within Microsoft Teams, as well as how it composes in our web experience, et cetera. Anything else on files before I move on that you can think of?
Great.
Yeah, and so that's one aspect of SharePoint. Another, of course, is lists. So here's this storefront approval. I added this list with exclamation point in big letters. You don't need to do that. That was for this demo, so you can tell the SharePoint tech that I'm looking at here. And so here you can basically add any SharePoint list. By default, it's ones that within this team, so the ones you've created within the team or the site associated with the team. And you have the full ability to edit and work with the list data. Karuana showed this in the keynote this morning. And so once again, you can't create a new list yet from Microsoft Teams. We're thinking about the best ways of doing that. But if you have an existing list, you can pin it here. You can fully work with it. And that is sort of the other leg of the three-legged stool of SharePoint. And then lastly, of course, people use SharePoint Pages. It is a great technology for composing together different parts of different data, adding commentary about it, and putting it all in one place. And so pages can be tabs as well. And so right here you can see an example page where, hey, a new kiosk is launching. I'm putting together my, a pretty picture about it along with exactly where you can find it and some information about it. And the full power of SharePoint Pages can appear right here. And these pages would be responsive. You could look at them within the Teams mobile app, et cetera. Now, you can't edit the page within Microsoft Teams. So I'll just be blunt about one of the limitations right now. Once again, we're on this journey where by the time we're done with it, Teams will be another endpoint, just like iOS, Android, or web for SharePoint. And we're slowly, as we do the integration work, as we're confident in its quality and performance, we're slowly releasing more and deeper integration. And so that's another leg of the SharePoint stool is SharePoint Pages within Microsoft Teams. And then let me see. Let me talk about the SharePoint. How many people are familiar with the SharePoint framework? A couple people. So that is our experience for creating web parts. So if I go to the SharePoint portal right here, it is a SharePoint page is composed of a bunch of SharePoint framework web parts. Some of them out of the box from us, and some of them coded by members of your IT shop, or some of them coded perhaps by third-party ISVs. And so this would, for instance, be a countdown timer web part. This would be a weather web part. Here is news coming in. These are all out-of-the-box web parts that would make up a SharePoint portal. And so if I were to scroll down here, you can see Yammer and others for a larger demo if I wanted to go deep on intranets. This part right here is what we call a SharePoint framework web part. So about 3 years ago, we launched the SharePoint framework, which is our modern open source way of extending SharePoint and creating parts on the page. This is a very classic example of what I would use a SharePoint framework for. It is for a outdoor company managing the store delivery timelines for this particular store. Something we as Microsoft could never create out of the box. We don't know what vendor you're using to manage your inventories. There's a bunch of specific line of business information that we would need to know in order to be able to effectively do this out of the box. So this is why we have a framework. The same framework that your IT shop would use would be the same one that we use internally, and it is called the SharePoint framework. And so one of the big announcements we've made over the past year is that these SharePoint framework extensions can also compose in Microsoft Teams. So if I go back to Microsoft Teams, you see this framework web part right here. And if I click on this right here, the same web part could appear right in Microsoft Teams. And so you have this ability to take the components of SharePoint, files, lists, pages, and web part, and have them starting to compose within Microsoft Teams. And you can see some limitations there, where sometimes you can edit, sometimes you can't. We're working on it. But broadly speaking, especially for collaboration, most of the value of SharePoint can manifest itself within the Teams UX. I'll demo really quick how to do that and just give you some pro tips on how to actually set this up. So if I were to hit the plus button here,
If I wanted to add files, by default, the files for this channel will be, you get a Files tab. It comes there by default. If I want to add a different document library, I use the Document Library app. If I want to add a page or list, I use from that particular site that this team is associated with, I'd use the SharePoint app. And then one pro tip, if you want to use a list or a page from another site, you can actually use the website app. And the website app will allow you to pin you take the URL of the list or page and pin it right there. The advantage of using the SharePoint and Document Library app over the website one is sometimes we take care of the auth glue a little more seamlessly, and we have a picker experience if it's from the same site. And we'll continue to make the auth experience even easier as time goes by. Anything to add on the SharePoint integration that you can think of?
No, I think it's important, and I hope people really understand how important it is that the same SharePoint Framework web part that lives on the SharePoint page works inside of Teams. Because think about this, you don't have to train people twice. They've learned how to interact with that particular experience. So whether or not they see it inside the team or on the SharePoint page, you've got consistency. And that's the thing that really puts the user at the center. And I saw a hand go up, so I just want to say we're going to have some time for questions towards the end. So hold your question. We're going to be happy to answer them.
Yeah, so I think we covered most of the basics of the SharePoint integration. Moving back to the deck, hopefully this slide makes a little more sense, where we really are thinking about a people-centric approach to software. Of course, Windows and Office and SharePoint are pillars of that, especially for those familiar with that IA, that want to bring it forward. Teams is this chance for a very fresh approach, a very people-centric approach, but with over time, less and less compromise between the two experiences as we take the major capabilities, the major scenarios, and make them completed within Microsoft Teams. So hopefully that makes sense as to why on this, there are many brands in Microsoft 365, but Teams is elevated to be on par with Windows and Office just because it is this chance to have a fresh approach, a people-centric approach to teamwork. So we talked about extensibility for a little bit, but I just want to, if we believe that Microsoft Teams is the hub for teamwork, it does mean that there are many line of business applications, there are many processes you're going to want to be able to put within Microsoft Teams. Karuana showed a few of them. Many of them were out of the box. I showed some that were related to collaboration in SharePoint. But there's a whole wealth of ways of extending Microsoft Teams such that it is truly your hub for teamwork. We talked about tabs. There is a tabs extension model that is designed for ISVs, although it can be used for enterprise developers. SharePoint Framework really is for enterprise development. In other words, when you're creating a tab just for your IT shop and your tenant, and not for global redistribution, SharePoint Framework is what I would recommend using to create a tab, then it can compose as a web part within SharePoint. Whether you're compose extensions, in other words, when you're writing new chats and you want to be able to have custom business logic run in there. Actionable messages is shared with Outlook in terms of taking a message and showing actions and commanding on it. And bots, connectors for importing line of business data, and various feed integrations. So there's a whole wealth of ways where you can really take your business processes and inject in the hub for teamwork from Microsoft.
And I want to also mention that at Build recently, we launched the Teams Platform Academy. And this is a series of online training that you can take to get more familiar with the services that we're talking about and the capabilities. Some fantastic MVPs and Microsoft staff helped us build this training series. So it's free, it's available on our Teams Platform Academy channel on YouTube. And we hope that you go out there and learn more about that.
Great. Okay, switch gears just a little bit. And I want to talk to, at this point, hopefully what you have is an overview of Microsoft Teams. I saw a lot of familiar, but at least a large people in the audience actively using it, so that was probably review, but you get the major components and how we talk about and show and evangelize it, and then how it fits in with collaboration. You're at the SharePoint conference. So how it fits in with SharePoint in particular, and how Teams fits into the larger Office and Windows ecosystem. What our grand strategy is, frankly, to be a more people-centric company and set of software. But let's talk about how technology can help foster a sense of inclusion on the team. I think when you are such a champion of thinking about the cultural transformation at the same time as you're thinking about the technology adoption, and really how technology is, as you started this whole talk with, spearheading the cultural change you wish to see within your organization. And we really think at Microsoft, we think an awful lot about how technology can enable this sense of inclusion. This is a slide that we often use internally when we want to talk about diversity within our own teams. And it makes the strong point that over time, diverse teams outperform those with the sameness bias, outperform non-diverse teams. Maybe not over the short term, as everybody sort of agrees and makes rapid progress because there is no active debate, but over the long term, the power of diverse teams is powerful and outperforms. And how do you get diverse teams? How does diverse teams end up working together? It's when you have a sense of inclusion and a sense of belonging within your team. And Microsoft Teams is just an awesome product for helping foster that. Is it some panacea that you adopted and all of a sudden you're going to have an inclusive team and a sense of belonging? No, but I'll demo in just a couple minutes. You know, things that you might take for granted or things you might wonder why it's even in the product, and it really is to give it a sense of belonging. Anything else on this before I switch into the demo?
One thing I wanted to say was, so I've been at Microsoft for about 8 years now, and before I was in the partner community and I was a customer. We used to have these conversations out in the field, and we wondered if people across Microsoft actually talk to one another, right? Because sometimes it would seem like, oh, a document would come out and it didn't align with something else or whatever. Everyone's doing great work and having good intentions, but there was definitely divisions in the organization. One of the things that I love about Teams and about this new conversation that we're having about inclusion and leveraging technology is Microsoft Teams is a product of the culture shift inside of Microsoft. All of these different various product engineering groups and marketing teams coming together to really deliver this experience is transformative. And I think it represents a new day of what we're trying to do in our organization and create that diversity. And I see that more and more, people really leaning in to understanding diverse ideas, to making that inclusion a part of their day-to-day rhythm of business. And that's really where we see some of these gains, when it's just part of what you're doing is really being inclusive with people, whether it's asking someone on the phone if they'd like to comment in a meeting, or making sure that you have a product experience that brings people together. So it's exciting for me personally to see how things have changed over the years.
Yeah, it's cool. So I'll give a demo of just a couple. I mean, there are so many examples we could have chosen from the product, as well as not only Teams, but Office All Up. I chose a couple. I'll do some best practices, some things that I do on my team. Feel free to jump in as well with other examples. But frankly, the chat service is the excellent example where it starts with a culture of belonging. This is not some Unicode console with monospace fonts. Like, you can express your emotions, you can express how you're feeling to the rest of your team. So this is why we have things like emojis, why you can have GIFs directly integrated, why these stickers. I don't know about you, my team uses the stickers all the time in terms of these of the things you can bring in. Some people say it's trivial, sometimes it's trivializing, but can be really important work, but maybe that is true for some industries and some organizations, but we really see it as a way of focusing a sense of belonging. So a quick story is Naomi Moneypenny recently took on a new role. She reports to me and now runs a team. And she started a new thing. She has about 5 folks that report to her, and every morning she asks 2 or 3 questions to her team. How are you feeling, and what are you working on, and what bothers you right now? And it's just 3 questions every morning in Microsoft Teams. She asks in an open forum with all the other folks on her team, and they all reply. And that's where they come like, oh, I didn't sleep last night because my baby was up all night, or I'm really stressed about this review with this Adam dude, or something like that. Do you need stickers to be able to achieve that? Maybe. It certainly helps. But the more point is, like, this is just an example of what it means to not only use real-time chat for decision making, but also to foster that sense of belonging and connection. And I think you'll see over time the Microsoft Teams product continue to evolve to be able to have those both emotional undercurrents as well as straight decision making within the product. So yeah, go ahead.
I completely agree with that. And the other thing I do want to assure people is that you do have control over those, what GIFs and images are included in your particular tenant. There are controls, again, in the IT Pro and the Admin Center. But we encourage you to at least get started, try it out. Because there's another component of this. Neurologically, your brain will comprehend an image before it can translate whatever you happen to be reading. And so, there's a speed to the type of communication you can do with some of these images, as well as, what Adam was pointing out, about that sense of inclusion and being in a team that's having more conversations. So, we do encourage you to try them out, but rest assured you can manage it if you need to.
Great. And then, we could probably give a whole hour talk. In fact, there may be even one at this conference about how to create teams, how to structure all the teams you're creating, and what conditions are put up on that. One thing I will pitch, and certainly when it talks about forming an inclusive and transparent culture, is to create public teams where you can.
Yes.
So, if I create a new team, there's a whole bunch of options here, but as I create a team, we have the dials. If you have a private team, if you need to control who has access to it, that is totally fine. But if you can create a team that is public, anybody in your organization, let me just go back and so you can see the option. It is an awesome way of working in the open. This is the way we work on the ODSP team. We were one of the first adopters of Microsoft Teams well before the product was launched publicly. And we have about 95 channels in the ODSP team. Everything from every review somebody leaves on an iOS app automatically gets pulled in, put in a Microsoft Team channel where everybody can comment on it, see if, the developers can take action if needed. We can sort of go back and forth between design, product, and engineering in real time. People can lurk on that. People can learn from others about how it's going. And so if you're really fostering this culture of inclusion, think intentionally about how you can lean into transparency. And we do think, as we design the product, how to enable that. And of course, this is something that needs a bunch of IT governance around it and controls, and not one size will fit all. But really, my second sort of tip for inclusion, using Microsoft Teams to the maximum inclusiveness, is to think about transparency and using this technology to drive transparency.
It's so important also when you think about the new employee experience. At Microsoft, something that's really common is people change teams quite a bit. And so they may not be exiting the company or brand new to the company, but they're new to role. And sometimes the new to role scenario is not one that people think about as much as they could. And while all that information is certainly useful inside of email, it's even better when you can kind of take a look at how the organization operates. You can start to feel a part of it before you not necessarily understand how everything happens around you. So, really having empathy for that new to role experience or a new employee, empathy is definitely a part of inclusion and belonging. So when we can instantiate that in our business processes, it makes us happy.
Yeah, and then the last demo and the last vignette on inclusion really has to do with meetings. As we said, the global workforce, 70% of people working remotely by 2022. And so we've thought a lot about how to design the meeting experience to foster a sense of inclusion. I think we'd all admit that remote meetings are oftentimes not a case where we are being our most inclusive selves. But we're continuing to add innovation to the product to try to do that. I've actually never demoed joining a meeting on stage. Being a SharePoint guy, I normally demo websites, so we will see how this all goes.
Let's see.
But for one, before we enter the meeting experience, we have a chance to be able to get set up, be able to configure just the speakers versus video. I think it's new that video is on by default.
Yes.
That was not the case in Skype. I have changed my particular culture to always join video meetings with videos if at all possible, and nudge others to do so as well. It's just richer communication. But sort of one strategic point here, we talked about how the quality of meetings has gone up with Microsoft Teams, and one of the reasons we can do that is to be able to have one code base we're rapidly innovating on. And so, this is an experience maybe in Skype for Business that is getting a little aged. We haven't had a chance to update. There's many different versions of the client. By having one version, having this sort of entry gate experience we can iterate on to figure out what's working, and having people enter meetings with the audio-visual working.
Do you blur?
I don't blur.
You don't blur? That's interesting. So being able to blur your background, it's a personal choice. Some people like to do it, some people don't. But of course here, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But occasionally I'll be in a place where it makes sense to blur that background. And also one of the reasons is sometimes people are just getting used to being on video and they're self-conscious about their location.
I just find it doesn't do my hair justice.
Okay, well that's probably fair. I have to be careful because it'll blur it out and make me look bald, which is really tragic.
It is a very cool feature. We happened to just move offices, and I did set up my offices so I wouldn't need to use the blur. But yeah, it is a cool feature on its own as well. And then one of the really cool things is this is in preview, but turning on live captions. We work with a remote workforce. Often English is not the first language, or people are working in various different languages. And it's just an awesome example of using the power of AI to be able to provide that context for people that are trying to follow along in a meeting. So if you can obviously see, I turned it on right here, and it is providing a real-time transcript of what we're doing right here. It's just a Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the ways that this gets used quite frequently, in these project meetings that you may be having, I have also taken to, with everyone's permission, recording the meeting.
Oh, I was just
So
getting
if I turn on transcription and live captions and I'm recording the meeting, that information is stored in that file. And so then after the fact, you know what I do? I search for my name, because then I can see if I didn't come to the meeting, if I got action items. Right? Did somebody say, oh, Karuana knows that, or Karuana now? I will say, it's still learning how to spell my name, but I can pretty much figure out the 4 or 5 spellings that it needs to do of Karuana. But it's definitely a pro tip. If you can't come to the meeting, get in the habit of doing that recording and then searching that transcription after the fact to find key elements of the meeting. It saves a lot of time when you're catching up.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, over the ... start recording. I find it to be a best practice to record the meetings, especially for those that can make it.
Yeah.
There's various different types of reasons people can't be there. And Teams makes it so easy to find the recording again. So this team was created within the context of a chat channel, so it's going to appear right there. The recording will appear right there. There is no, I know there's a recording, it's disappeared into the ether, I can't find it again. It is all coordinated in one place. So I think it makes it incredibly easy and simple. So, story arcing this talk, we gave you an overview of Microsoft Teams so you understand the individual components, its grander strategy at Microsoft within Windows and Office and how SharePoint ladders up within that. And then really talking, because at the end of the day, I hope you bring back and talk about implementing Teams as part of a cultural transformation within your company. And I don't think there's any cultural transformation as important as inclusion and belonging. And there's a lot of product truth can use to help talk about the change agenda you want to have within your company using Microsoft Teams. So do you want to take it from here?
It's so true. Thank you, Adam. That was excellent. So yes, change, driving diversity, inclusion, and belonging, all these are important things. And there are other business processes that you can transform as you think about onboarding to Teams. And one of the things that I see quite often is people are using Teams already, but they're using it in pockets, or they're really primarily using it for chat or certain conversations, maybe a little bit of file sharing. But this slide gives you some examples of the different types of business processes that you could transform by really intentionally moving them to Teams. And I use that word with intention because there's nothing really worse than having a foot in each world. It's important to have a conversation with the people you collaborate with so that you can agree where you're going to do that collaboration and how. And that will really increase your satisfaction with the experience. There's more examples of like this in our productivity library, and we have some steps to help you move forward with Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Teams. Today we launched a new Microsoft Adoption Resources page that really brings together all of the different resources that we have to drive adoption in Microsoft Teams and beyond. And I just want to give you a little bit of a view of what that looks like right here. Here we go. So you can get to this via ak.ms Microsoft Adoption, and as you scroll down, you see that we have adoption resources for M365 all up, for security and compliance, and SharePoint, OneDrive, our Microsoft Teams Adoption Flipbook, and Yammer, and we'll be adding additional resources here. And the other thing we'd like you to do is find your tribe. We run an Office 365 Champions program. It's a free program that you can attend every month. You'll see me out there, it's my program, and it helps you stay up to date with all the new tools and capabilities that are coming to help you drive adoption of the services. And lastly, if this is a passion of yours like it is of mine, you can take our Service Adoption Specialist course. That's an online course provided by our partner edX. It's authored by our team, and that will help you really know what are the best practices, the strategies and tactics that are necessary to drive service adoption in your organization. One of the things that really sometimes can get people stopped in this journey is security and compliance. And I wanted to show you some of the assets that we put together in this new flipbook about security and compliance. Oftentimes you need to address some of these issues as you think about going through Microsoft Teams. And it gives you what that security and compliance model should look like. And these new resources really speed the time to value. And of course, we have a similar flipbook that's available for Microsoft Teams. And this pulls together all those resources that are created from engineering and our business practices groups to really help you understand what is the best way to really drive teams in your organization. So we hope that you use these tools And then visit our successwithteams.com site. That is where we have all of our technical documentation. We're constantly updating that. And for those of you who may be doing migrations from Skype for Business to Teams, or still have some on-prem presence, we have information for you there. So, you know, we're on an exciting journey, and we're doing it together. I want to call out that we have some other team members from the Teams Engineering Group here in the front, and my other colleague, Rima, also from Teams Engineering. She specializes in the government sector, which we also love. And we also happen to have David Johnson in the audience, who is the preeminent man who runs Office 365 for Microsoft. Really a big expert on governance, best practices for the implementation of Office 365. So we have some time left, and we're happy to take